All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this. First of all, this is FIDE Master Adult Training. I want to welcome you to the Chess Training Using Students Game seminar today, brought to you by ChessUniversity.com. And I'm looking very much forward to helping you guys all to improve by looking at these different training positions we're going to look at. We're going to see a variety of positions today, reviewing some of my own students' games as well as other students that I've spoken with in the past. And we're learning about a variety of ideas in regards to planning, calculation. We're going to look throughout a lot of analysis of these different interesting positions, and it's going to help us to overall improve for sure. So we're going to cover a lot of things throughout these games that we look at. We're going to talk about how to play with a long-term advantage versus your opponent's short-term advantage. We're going to talk about how to use piece activity despite being in a worse endgame. We're going to talk about how to fight back from an opening mistake to create counterplay. Lots of stuff like that throughout the different game examples we look at, and much more, going forward from that. Nice to see you guys in the chat box. Hang My Sack and JT Dasham. Nice to see you guys there. So let's go ahead and we're going to jump right into our first position. Let's go ahead and put it on the board here and see what is going on with this one. So let's get it here. And so we'll fast forward to this position. Okay, so in this first position here, again, just because we're working on training in these positions, it's not going to always just be going to be me doing all of the talking, but it's also going to be involving plenty of questions for you guys in the chat box in the audience, getting you guys to think, helping you guys to improve at these different kinds of positions that we might face. So this is the first position we have here. It is White's move in this position here. But before we begin looking at moves, specific moves in this position here, I'm curious about what you guys' thoughts might be on this kind of position here. So what are some things you guys notice going on in this position? From White's side of the board, from Black's side of the board, what do you see here? Okay, so I see here, let me see in the chat box at this point. Hang My Sack notices that Black's king is safer. That is absolutely correct. King on g8 is pretty safe here in comparison to the king on e2, which is definitely a bit more in the center of the board for sure. What else? Black is more active than White. You're absolutely correct about that as well. The rook is pretty active on the c3 square. The knight and the bishop are both developed. And again, in comparison to White's pieces, neither rook has moved yet. Bishop is still on its starting square. And knight's also, it's developed, but not very far up the board at this point. Let's see, what else here? Notice White has some issues with development. Definitely correct. They just mentioned that. And king isn't safe. Good, very good. So overall, our first impression of this position might be that Black is just better. We might think, okay, Black's got the better development. Black has the more active pieces, safer king. It might seem like Black just has everything going for him here. However, though, if you are in White's position, you always want to look for the positives of your position as best as you can. You don't want to get pessimistic and only notice the bad things in your position. So what are some of the positives for White, though? There might not be a ton, but there are some things that White's got going for him here. What would you say those might be? What things are in White's favor? So Mongrel Tiger mentions that White controls the center. That is a very big thing. In comparison to Black here, it's actually White that controls the center a bit better. D4 pawn, E4 pawn, controlling the 4 central squares here. And Black has no pawns in the immediate 4 squares right in the center of the board. So that is something that White does have as an advantage here. So a bit better control of the center. The B file is also half open for White here. Very good. So maybe one day, potentially, a rook going to b1 would be a useful piece on the half-open b file. That's a positive for white. D-pawn has nothing in front of it, so that means that potentially the D-pawn is a pass pawn, might be able to advance and move forward as the game goes on. So white does have a couple of things going for him here. Maybe it's not a ton of things, but overall there are a couple of positives for white in this position here. Semi-passed, yeah, it's not... The e6 pawn does still control d5, but aside from that, it'll become passed the farther it goes up the board. Very true. Okay, so we're in white's shoes, though. It would be easy to play black here, I think, or at least a little easier considering the development and activity of the pieces. But it's up to white to figure out how to kind of untangle his pieces, because that is a big thing here. The development is a big problem. We need to untangle our pieces as best as we can at this point. So, how might we do that? That's the question here. That's up to us to figure out at this point. Okay, so Hang My Sack says e5. Mate King says, how about f4 to start moving the pawns up the board? It is white's turn, yeah, Hang My Sack. JT Dasham mentions the move bishop to b2. Okay, so a lot of these moves make sense here. f4 advancing on in the center and gaining some space. Bishop b2 hits the rook. e5 hits the knight. I mean, these are definitely moves you might consider in this position here. Now, of these moves, I would say that there are some things we have to consider with each of these moves. Let's put it that way. Let's kind of go from left to right. Let's look at bishop b2 first. If we make the move bishop b2, we do hit the rook. That is true. Black has to do something about the rook attack. What do you think black might do? Okay, rook c2 would be pretty straightforward at this point. Rook to c2, hit the bishop, also pinning the knight to the king, and then just like Mate King says here, then knight takes e4 would be a big problem. White's got to figure out what to do about the bishop, maybe rook b1, and then knight takes e4. This is not good for white at all at this point. He's down a pawn, d2 knight's hit, very bad position for white here. So while bishop b2 looks nice, it does hit the rook, developing with a threat is generally a good idea. Unfortunately, the specifics of the position, rook c2 just kind of beats that idea back pretty quickly. So we're kind of rolling out bishop b2 for the moment. Maybe we'll play it a move or two later, but we can't do it on this first move just yet. Let's look at e5, because we are kind of going left to right here. We looked at bishop b2, let's look at e5 here. If you make the move e5, black is most likely going to play knight d5. You know, put the knight on the outpost on d5. Makes perfect sense. Now, before we look at knight e4, which would probably be the follow-up, let's think about this for a moment. If we make the move e5, we are hitting the knight on f6, obviously. The knight will move like we just showed. But there are some things we have to consider about this pawn push. Going back to our passed pawn, what happens to our passed pawn potential if we make this move e5? Okay, it's gone because there's no protection. Pass pawn potential goes bye-bye. So it could still be possible, but it's a whole lot harder to do if we can't make the move d5, right? Our passed pawn potential goes from, you know, being there to now this d4 pawn is a backward pawn. It's called a backward pawn because it is behind the e5 pawn, and it has a very hard time ever advancing because black is just blocking it right now. Now, we do gain a little extra space with this move e5. There are some potential benefits, but you do also have to think about anytime you move a pawn, or especially if you move a pawn, but even when you're moving other pieces, you always want to think about the consequences of your move. In this case, e5 was actually played in the game a few moves later, but I would say that e5, we'd have to be really careful about doing this because it gives black this nice d5 square. It makes our passed pawn potential much lower. And again, we're not developing anything. We're not getting really untangled at this point just yet. Now, we could do knight e4, though. Let's look at that for a moment. What do you think black might do after this? Obviously, the knight's hit. Or, I'm sorry, the rook is hit. How might black react? What do you think black might do? Rook check, c2 check, and then if the king moves to d3, the other rook goes to c8. Okay, so the check on c2 makes perfect sense. Rook to c4 might also be a fine move as well in order to hit the d4 pawn. But yeah, rook c2 or rook c4 both make perfect sense. You go rook c2 check. If the bishop blocks on d2, it's a little bit awkward because now this bishop is, obviously pinned. If the king goes to d3, then the rook moves over to c8. And it's still not a very, you haven't really untangled your pieces as much as you would like. You can still do bishop d2, however, black might just start, he might play f6 and chip it away at your center. He might walk his king over a little bit. You haven't really solved too many of the issues here. It's even hard to play a move like rook c1 because your a3 pawn is going to need protection. So you have gotten your pieces off their back rank, that is true. But at what cost? You've still got the rooks on the c-file. You gave black the nice d5 square. This is kind of the way the game actually ends up going, but there's definitely some better ways white could do things, which we're going to look at. Now, the third move that was mentioned in the chat earlier was the move f4. The problem with f4, once again, is that you're not developing anything, unfortunately. Black might still play rook c2, threatening to take the pawn. You might try to move your king up. I double up the rooks, threatening this check on c3. And again, you're still in a very tough position as white here. It's really hard to move your pieces at this point. So the main thing we need to do, the main thing that's going on in this position is the idea of short-term advantages versus long-term advantages. Remember, black has the short-term advantage of piece activity. And a lead in development. Why is a lead in development a short-term advantage? Why is that not a long-term thing? I'll ask that for you guys in the chat. Oops. All right. Why is a lead in development not a long-term advantage? Okay, Making says, because with the proper moves, that lead can diminish. You're absolutely correct. If white is able to catch up in development, then that advantage of the development lead black has, it just disappears if white catches up. That's kind of the big thing here. The second thing would be, why is this space advantage in the center of the board, why is that a long-term advantage? Can black easily just decide to win a pawn, for example? Can he decide to just get rid of our space advantage without us, making a mistake? Okay, if he has good tactics, if black is able to do some specific tactic against the center, that might be true. However, the main thing is the space advantage is, it's not going to disappear easily, right? The thing is with the lead in development, at least white, can catch up, but black can't just all of a sudden, decide to win the pawns unless there are some tactics. That is true. So the main thing is, though, we just need to catch up in development as white. We don't really need to attack the knight. We don't really need to gain more space since we're already good on the space advantage here. We need to just get our pieces untangled in this position. Now, we tried that with the move bishop b2, but it didn't work because of rook c2 with the double threat, hitting the bishop and also pinning the knight there. Is there anything else we can do here to try to activate our pieces while also, trying to create some play in the position, I suppose? Oop, that was a bit loud. And now we're getting hosted. There we go. Welcome all of the chess.com TV people. Let me go ahead and turn that alert down a little bit because that was kind of loud. Okay. So the question again, just to repeat for those of you who just got the host here, the question is, essentially we're trying to figure out how to untangle as white in this position. Black has a lead in development, black has better piece activity, but white is trying to untangle his pieces, and then eventually he's going to use his lead in space and better control of the center to, improve his position as things go along. So let's see what we can do here as white to improve our position ultimately. Okay, so Apopkaless says a4. Okay, we'll keep that highlighted because that is potentially an idea. Rook a2 or rook b1 from Mate King. Okay, we'll keep some of those ideas in mind. And Mongrel Tiger mentions knight to b1. Knight to b1 does hit the rook, but I'll keep it. I'll kind of put it, put the arrow here. But we want to be a little careful, probably, about undeveloping a knight, I suppose. But definitely a couple of rook moves, a pawn move potentially, something like that might be a way to untangle a little bit here. Of these moves, couple of moves here, aside, I would probably roll out knight b1 just because of the undeveloped nature of it. But between this a4, rook a2, and rook b1 moves, which one are the most forcing? Which of these three is the most forcing? And then we'll kind of talk about a little bit why forcing is important. Hey, Jordy. What about e5 and knight e4? I did mention that a little bit earlier, I think right before the chess.com TV host. If you go for e5 and knight e4, maybe somebody in the chat box can also, if they want to chime in that was here earlier. The idea is that it's harder to use It's harder to ever create a passed pawn here if you make the move e5, because now you can never advance the d-pawn. And also you give black the nice outpost, and even if you hit the rook here on c3, this rook is still going to be, it's still going to be a very difficult position for white to kind of get his pieces out here. Well, that is actually what was played in the game, so we will see that a little bit later on, but we're trying to see if there's a better way of untangling without creating weaknesses. And I'm also following along with the chess.com TV chat as best as I can here as well, even though it's not on the on this actual Twitch stream video. Rook to b1 is forcing, rook to b1. Okay. I'm also just going to repeat, I know, again, some people just showed up, why bishop e2 doesn't work. Then we'll go into the rook b1 move. Bishop to b2, the downside is that rook c2 immediately creates a big problem for white. Your bishop on b2 is hit, the knight on d2 is pinned, and black is threatening both to capture the bishop on b2 and also capture the pawn due to the pin. So unfortunately, bishop b2 doesn't work due to this rook c2 move. But maybe we can make a move before playing bishop b2. Maybe we can prepare the move bishop b2. So now let's look at the move rook b1. Rook b1 is probably the most, it is definitely of the three, the a4, rook a2, and rook b1. Rook b1 is definitely the most forcing. What is our idea with rook to b1? What are we trying to do with rook b1 here? Okay, we're attacking b7. Pretty straightforward. Does still require a little bit of calculation, though. We're hitting b7, but we're also no longer defending our a3 pawn, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Let's say black takes a3. How do we respond here? Okay, we got to take on a3. We definitely cannot take b7 first, because then we'll lose the bishop on c1. But we go ahead and take on a3. Rook takes back on a3. We take b7. And how have we improved here? What's the difference between this position and this position? How have we benefited? I'm not saying that white's winning or anything like that, but how have we at least improved to some degree? Okay, we've improved our development a little bit. We do have two open files, the B and C file, that is definitely true. We've increased our activity. We have simplified a little bit by trading the bishops and a pair of pawns. And we also have the rook on the 7th rank. So we've improved quite a bit of things here. Now, we still have the rook on h1 that we haven't done anything with, but he'll probably go to c1, maybe double on the 7th rank. You can kind of see how white has just all of a sudden just gotten a bit, of an improved position here. Not that white's winning again, but it's just better than it was before. And we still also have our space advantage. That still hasn't disappeared. So a lot of things have improved for us if this route ends up happening. So probably if black is smart, he's not going to let us take on b7. He might make the move b6 instead. Keep the pawn protected. And now he is threatening to take a3 because it's, we don't have the b7 pawn we can capture. So first step is accomplished. We developed a piece. We made a threat. Black had to defend against it. And now we need to continue moving on from here. So what's the next step? What can we do after this? There is a little bit of a change in the position now that the rook is on b1 instead of a1. There's something we can do that's possible here that maybe wasn't available earlier. Okay, Mate King mentions the move rook b3. Rook b3 does look to trade off the active rook off of the c3 square, but there is a little bit of an issue with this move. Let's see if anybody in the chat can spot the reason this doesn't work out. Okay, knight takes e4. Essentially, black has two ways he can do this. He can take on e4. This knight on d2 is overloaded. If it takes on e4, you lose the rook on b3 that's no longer protected. So knight takes e4 works. Or you could also just trade rooks first and then take on e4. Either way, rook b3 is going to lead to a pawn being lost, unfortunately. So you're down material. You probably don't want to go, for that route if you can help it. So instead of rook b3, we still need to, push our opponents back a bit. Or push our opponent back a bit. So the other move that you guys were mentioning was bishop b2. What's the difference between bishop b2 now compared to a move ago? Why is this a bit safer to play now compared to on the very first move? Okay, so the big thing here is that the bishop's already protected, right? The rook is protecting the bishop. So the rook move, rook c2, doesn't have the same threat. There's no rook takes b2 threat because we're protected. The only threat here would be knight takes e4. How can we meet this threat now that there's only one threat rather than a second one? What can white do from here? There's actually a couple of options that would probably be fine to play. Okay, we could do d3 or king to d3. That still works out. Get out of the pin, hit the rook, defend the pawn. So king d3 does work. f3 also works to keep the pawn protected. So f3 is also available. We could go for e5, though I still tend to lean away from this move because you're blocking in the bishop. Your pawn, it's harder to make a pass pawn, and, I need to turn that alert down a little bit. Okay, thanks for the follow, AG Hutchins. 94 is still possible here as well, and things are a little bit, a little messy with the pin still. Personally, I would lean towards king d3. Rook to c1 also works as well, possibly. Actually, now that I say that, there is a little issue with rook c1 we'll look at. But I would probably lean towards king d3. King d3, get out of the pin, threaten the rook. Let's say black doubles up the rooks here. What might we do next? The rooks are still pretty active. We need to also notice there is another threat here that we have to watch out for. Let me see. I'm going to turn this volume down a little bit. Thanks for the follow, though. I appreciate it. Okay, let me get back to this. Rook to c1. Yeah, we could do rook to c1 here. It actually doesn't matter which rook we use. Even the b rook is possible due to if he tries to take our bishop, we capture the rook on c8. So either rook is playable here. We could do rook to c1. We could use the other rook to go to c1. Stuff like this works out pretty well. We're looking to trade the rooks. If there is an exchange, you know, let's say that black exchanges everything here. The main thing here is that we've gotten rid of our opponent's active pieces. We've simplified the position quite a bit. And again, the long-term advantage we have here is the fact that we still have the extra space and potential pass pawn in the center. Again, I'm not saying this is winning for white or anything like that, but we've been able to make our position a lot easier to play. It's not as complicated, it's not as much pressure on us, we've simplified things quite a bit, and we're doing pretty good here. Now, let's even take this line. Oh, there's also a donation. Hey, Happy Chess Lizard. Thanks a lot for the donation. Really appreciate the $2.99. Let's take this one extra move here. Let's say black tries to move knight g4. Knight to g4. He's forking the h and the f pawns here. And we'll rewind a few moves in a moment. Think about what you would do in response to this. Okay, I'm checking both the chat boxes here. F3, F4 traps the knight, F3. I'm seeing a lot of F3s here. I'm also seeing some D5s. F3 is probably the simplest way to keep everything protected here. If the knight takes the H2 pawn, what is the trouble with this? Or why does this get messy for black? Oh, there's also a cheer here. Thanks a lot for the cheer, Naughty Ash. Appreciate it. Let's see. Okay, the knight can't move. So because the knight can't move, what are we doing here? How do we take advantage of that? King e2, Crazy Corey says. Okay, King e2, also Mr. Chess. So we could just play simply King e2, f2, g2, and we're just walking over to capture the knight. Black can make it a little complicated with moves like g5 and g4, but ultimately this is still in white's favor at the end of the day. g4, we can play a move like f4, and then still go trap the knight. We'll get a pawn back, actually. And again, the main thing is we still have this, you know, extra space. We can always play the move a4 to get our pawn off of the opponent's colored bishop. And we're still going to try to use our pawns to create a pass pawn, probably somewhere on the d file, I imagine. Ultimately, though, the main thing is we've gotten rid of our opponent's activity. We've equalized that quite a bit. And we're not under as much pressure. The position is a whole lot simpler at that point. So, notice here from the start, rook to b1, bishop to b2, put a rook on c1. You could also throw in the move f3 at some point if you don't want to hurry up, or if you don't want to worry with knight g4. But again, it's all about this idea of kind of holding on in a tricky position and creating counterplay and fighting back. Now, let's see how this game continued, because the way that we talked about wasn't exactly the way the game went, but there are some important ideas in the remainder of the game we're going to see. Now, in the game, white decided on the move a4. I don't think a4 is bad, but I do like rook b1 a little more because of the activity that it hits the b pawn. Black doubled up on the c file, and white did ultimately make the move e5 here. Unfortunately, not accepting challenges at the moment. Naughty, maybe a little bit later, but not at the specific moment right now. Sorry about that. White did end up playing e5 here in the game, though. Black played knight d5, and we're going to fast forward a move here. We're going to kind of see why this comes back to bite white, to hurt white a bit later in the game, as we'll see. Bishop to b2, rook to c2. Bishop to a3. White is looking to exchange off the pair of bishops, which is not a bad idea. I'm going to fast forward here a little more, and we get to this position here. Okay, so objectively, white has made some progress here. Trade off his bad bishop for the opponent's good bishop. Maybe now there's the use of the d6 square at some point. We got our king a little more active. Our rook is a little better on a3 than it was on a1. So white has done, made a little bit of progress here. Now, this is still a position where... let me see the follow here. Kahani, I think that's how you say it. Thanks a lot for the follow. Appreciate it. So now we still have to figure out what to do from here. We have essentially equalized. We're kind of untangled a bit better here, but we still have to figure out what we're going to do, how to improve our position. So what might we do going forward from here? So think about if you were in white shoes in this position. Hey, Naughty, thanks for the follow as well. Appreciate it. All right, let's see here. So knight b4 threat, so maybe rook b3 or the other rook b1. Salam says rook to b1. I would play f3 to get the knight to d6 in without worrying about losing that pawn, or rook b1 is also good. Okay, so let's say that we have two options here. We have rook b3 and we have rook b1. Both rooks going to the b file, both rooks hitting the b7 pawn. But what's the difference between the two? What is the difference between moving the rook to b3 versus the other one to b1? Hey, Zaima, thanks for the cheer. Appreciate it. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. Rook b1 is activates the rook that's not already in the game. Rook b1 is developing an undeveloped piece. Activating h-rook with rook b1. Rook b1 because you let the a3 rook cover an important space. Rook to b3 allows rook to a2 is what I think John Linus is saying. Okay. Rook b3 is looking to trade off. It's rook to b1. Okay, so I do agree. I believe rook to b1, if I had to pick between the two rooks, is going to be the better of the two. And there is a specific reason. Generally speaking, you want to develop your undeveloped pieces, but there is also a follow-up that we're going to see as important. So let's look at rook b1. How do you think black is going to deal with this threat, first of all? Hey, Chessby and Chess Challenger. How do you think black is going to meet the threat on the b7 pawn? And also another thing, we also covered the b4 check, which is nice. Hey, Chessby, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. How to meet this threat. Okay, probably black will play b6, push or rook c7, b6. I think b6 is probably the most reasonable defense. Let's look at some things that black might fall into, though. Let's say black plays rook to c7 here. It uses the 8th rank rook. What can white do here? Oh, thanks for the follow, Chess Challenger. Appreciate that. We could double the rooks, could play knight d6 potentially. Ruben Hogenhout in the chess.com TV chat says rook takes b7. We can actually go and play rook takes b7 right away. Hold on a second. Push the a-pawn to exploit. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we could play rook takes b7 right away here. The reason this works is simply because this rook on c7 is overworked. He's protecting c2. He was protecting b7. Now we end up just winning a pawn in this position. Black takes b7. We take c2. And we are simply up material here. Let me resize the chat box here as well. Oh, it's not letting me. Okay, we're just going to deal with that for now then. The chat will pop back up on the screen in just a second. Push the a-pawn. Okay, so yeah, we can take on b7 here. That's that little mini tactic that Black might kind of walk into if he's not careful. So if we back up a bit, rook to c7, this 8th rank rook doesn't work. He could technically use the other rook, but that's pretty passive. Probably the best move for Black to play is b6. But now we're going to see why keeping the rook on the a3 square was important. Let's see here. Let me see if I can fix this size on this. One moment. Let me fix this. Not letting me do it at the moment. Okay. Sorry if the text on the screen got a little smaller here, but yeah, when I had to accept one of the comments from somebody, I think it refreshed it and threw the size off a bit. Sorry about that. I think it's just going to be a little smaller font for a little while here. Okay, so we left the rook on a3 though for an important reason. What can we do as the follow-up at this point? And I just missed a follow. Let me look back to see what that was. My apologies. Hey, Jalen Chen. You came late. You're doing perfectly fine here. Appreciate you showing up. Okay, so we can make the move a5 now. a5 is a very important move in this position. We're looking to trade off our isolated pawn. Right, this a-pawn was isolated, not a very strong pawn. We're looking to trade this off and open up more space for our rooks that we have on the board. If Black takes the pawn, the rook takes back. All of a sudden, once again, Black has the C file, which is good, but we have the A and the B files that are very strong. That's, definitely an improvement for White in this position here. Hey, Corky Dorky, thanks for the follow. So now, Black doesn't have to take the pawn, that is true. I'll look at knight b6 in a moment, John Linus. That is a good question, though. I'll look at knight b6 in just a second. The main thing, though, is that, if this exchange does happen, much more activity for White on these two files compared to what he had before. Knight d6 might still be an idea later on. We're hitting a7. We're doing pretty good here. If Black does not take the pawn, we'll take on b6, and then we'll still give him an isolated pawn that we can kind of focus on attacking. Now, let's back up for a moment. What if Black did knight b6? That was a good question. And you are correct, John Linus. a5 does not work because of the move knight c4. And if we take the rook on c2, knight takes a3 is going to cause big problems for White here. We definitely not want to do that. But instead of playing a5, for example, we can do maybe this rook b3 move again, and then play a5. That way our rook on a3 is not being attacked. If he takes a4, we take b7, and again, we're getting pretty active pieces in this position here. Yeah, it is basically a minority attack, as the great Alk is saying. Yep. Knight d6, then a5. Definitely stuff like that, for sure. Aren't you worried about Black taking your pawns? We have our stuff covered pretty well. f2 is covered by the knight. Our knight's not going to be able to be attacked easily. We're threatening a7. Maybe we play, like, you know, double up on the 7th rank. White's actually doing, you know, decently well in a position like this. Not easy for black to keep everything held together. Even though black has the open file, there's no targets here. In comparison, we're actually targeting something, which is a big difference here. Okay, so let's back up. Let's see what actually happened in the game here. In the game, white chose to play the move rook to b3. And we're going to kind of see how this was a little bit of a loss of a tempo in the way. Because after rook b3 and b6, a5 doesn't work the same here because, well, if black takes the pawn, we can't take it back immediately. And now, like, knight b4 is a relatively annoying move in this position. You know, something like this, and knight c2, and knight takes d4, and all this kind of bad stuff is happening. So white, instead of playing a5, he played the move rook a1. But the problem here is he kind of just wasted a move. He should have done rook b1 and then immediately a5. Because of the loss of time, what can black do here to prevent white's plan? What can white do here to prevent the move that white looks like he's trying to do? Yep. Z Fox has got it. John Linus. The Great Elk. Yep. The move a5. a5 would have put a big kind of monkey wrench into white's plans here. Knight to b4 is now going to happen. The b file is going to be completely shut off. All of a sudden, white has, you know, worsened his position for sure. Even though b6 is technically weaker once you make the move a5, the knight's going to block off the b file, and that's not going to matter at all. So this would have been a good move for black. a5 would have really caused white some big problems here. Knight b4 is coming. The d-pawn will be a target. That wouldn't be very good for white. Instead, black decided to play king f8. So again, white now has the chance to play the move a5. White should have gone ahead and played it and would have kind of gotten back to the stuff we looked at earlier. But white instead played the move rook a3. Rook a to a3. And like I said, this is one of my own private students I've taught in the past. He told me the reason for this move here was that he wanted to make the move knight c3 and trade off all the pieces. While that's not a bad idea, generally, you know, trading off your opponent's active pieces, as we've talked about earlier in this position, is good to do. There's going to be a problem with this move here. So now I want you guys to think here. Think ahead. Is knight c3 a good move? Does this work for white? And this is going to kind of wrap all the way back to an earlier move that white played that is going to kind of come back to bite him. Yeah, that's why black tried the move rook c1. He was trying to maybe go for rook h1 or f1 or something like that. But now white plays knight c3 looking to trade. What's going on here? Okay, Tony Wang says you lose most of your pieces. They're important, so no. That is true. You are trading off a lot of your own pieces, but, you know, I can understand his thinking here. He wants to also trade off black's active pieces, but there is a problem at the end of the day. And I think that Z Fox in the chat here has the idea. And also Naughty Ash. There's a majority on the queen side. And it's going to end up that black is able to... We don't have a pawn majority. We can't make a pass pawn. Black can make a pass pawn once everything's traded. We can't make a pass pawn anymore. Why can't we make a pass pawn anymore? What did white do earlier that now is coming back to hurt him? Okay, we made the move e5 earlier. Remember, even before this was actually played in the real game, I was talking about how e5 did have some consequences to it. Now we can't make a pass pawn. Black can play a6, b5, create a pass pawn, plop his king on the d5 square, and we're going to end up losing the king and pawn endgame here, unfortunately. There are some little subtleties that can get a little tricky, but if you put this in a computer, and obviously I had reviewed this game in the past, long time ago, this is winning for black at this point. Unfortunately, for the student who played this game. Now, notice again, I'll explain why this is, I'll explain why this is losing. Chess Zebra, thanks for the follow, appreciate it. Let's see what happens here. King to d7 was played in the game. King to b4, king to c6, king to c4. You might think, oh, I have the opposition, that's pretty good. The problem, though, is that black plays a6, and the endgame is just lost at this point. No matter what white does, black is going to play b5, obviously the trade. He's going to put the king on d5, and he's just going to pretty much sacrifice the b-pawn, use that as bait to pull the king away, and then black is just going to go and munch all the pawns on the king side. Decoy the pass pawn and sneak the king in, exactly like ZFox said there, yep. And the Great Alk in the chess.com chat had the idea there as well. So, even with best play here, there's nothing white can do, unfortunately. If you go king c3, even if you make some waiting moves, let's say you try like h5, trying to hold off here as, h5, maybe you try to stall the opponent. Black just plays b5, take, take. If you go king to b4, black just gives up the b-pawn, and all of these other pawns are going to be lost. Now, there is a little... Let me preface this, actually. Hey, Someday, with a bunch of sevens, thanks for the follow. There is actually some... and DK Black, thanks for the follow as well. There are actually some little subtleties that black has to be a bit careful about here. It actually ends up, if black takes the d4 pawn, and this gets a bit advanced here. If black takes the d4 pawn, this is actually a draw. And I'll show why. Hold on. Yeah, king c5, king here. King d6, king takes. King e7, king takes, king takes, king takes. This all of a sudden is going to be a draw, because white actually somehow, surprisingly, turns this into a drawn position. He's going to move the king. Black needs to lock the king on the h-file, and even if you do this, white's just going to go stalemate himself. Black is going to have to accept the stalemate at this point, which is a really funny situation, but white ends up getting the draw. So it actually ends up, like I said, you have to be a bit precise here. The way to win for black is to play a move like g5 here. That way, if f4 is played, we trade, and our king is closer to capturing the pawn. So this is still winning for black, but there are some little subtleties you have to watch out for at the end of the day. If white trades, I don't know what it's to do. f4, g5 again, king moves, take, take. Well, in this case, you can just push the h-pawn. Or even just take the d4 pawn. I think that's completely winning as well. King moves, something like this. And black is just going to win the game with the h-pawn here. So at the end of the day, at the end of the day, this was going to end up being a losing position for white as soon as he offers the trade of pieces with knight to c3. And it's interesting here that this ties all the way back into that original position we looked at because of the move e5. e5 was played, it took away the possibility of making the pass pawn, and then the king and pawn endgame ends up being a loss for white, unfortunately. So one of the main things to get from this game, aside from the a lot of what we looked at the beginning, trying to untangle our pieces, calculating a little bit, aside from that stuff, you want to be able to look some steps ahead, calculate ahead, and think about how the endgame might be affected by some of the earlier moves you make in a game. e5 here earlier in the game affected the endgame. It affected the ability for white to make a pass pawn. If white was in this position here, If the pawn was on e4, I can show that real quick. If the pawn is on e4, this is a draw now. You're not losing the game anymore at this point. Thanks for all the follows. I'm sorry I'm missing some of the names here. TP Courtney was the last one. Thanks a lot. Do I look so deep in a game when playing? I mean, ideally you want to look that deep, but it's not easy. I'm not gonna pretend like it's something simple by any means. But you do want to know like these I guess basic principles and patterns to keep in mind. Noticing how e5 you can't make the passed pawn anymore. And the big thing here in this game, White could have avoided losing if he just didn't play the move knight c3. Right? If he didn't play the move knight c3 here, if he had just played like a5 instead, it's still a playable game. Knight c3 was the big mistake because he hadn't calculated out the endgame. And that kind of comes back to hurt him for sure. So the example starts off with some, a little more basic ideas, but definitely picks up in the advanced department as the game goes on for sure. Now let's look at another example. I want to put this one on the board for us to check out. This one's a bit more in-game based. We're going to look at one that's a bit earlier in the game. Let me put... Thanks, Andom, for the follow. Appreciate it. Let's see here. Let me use this example here. Man, I've been missing all these follows. Fonk TW, thanks for the follow as well. Okay, let's use this one here. This will be a bit more middle game based. Oops. Okay, we're gonna flip the board. Let's see here. I think I have to extend this a little bit to see the button to flip it. And then we will put it right back. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're black in this position here. Thank you for the follow, Anton Tool. Okay, so we're black in this position here, and there's quite a few things going on at this point. 3B Duel, thanks for the follow as well. What is going on in this position from black's point of view? There's quite a few things. Maybe you might even know the opening this position came from. What are some things you notice in this position here? And I know I went through that king and pawn game a little quick in the previous game. I apologize if that was a little quick, but you can always watch the video recording, I suppose, on the Twitch channel a little later if you need to see it again. Let's see what's going on in this example, though. Let me scroll around to here a little bit. Chess Zebra says, I like d takes e4 to activate my bishop on b7. Okay, definitely a move that might make a lot of sense here. The knight is not developed. You are correct about that as well, mate king. This did come from the Nimzo. Very good, Anton Tool. Or Anon Tool, sorry. His bishop is stuck. Kind of scrolling to catch the comments here. White's king is a little open due to the f-pawn. Has an advantage in the center. Knight's undeveloped. We gave up our dark square bishop for a pawn, maybe, or for nothing. White's more active. Queen's Indian. Black should try to play c5 at some point. Okay, so there's quite a few things going on here. This came from the Nimzo Indian. Something along the lines of, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop e4, and there was a trade on c3 earlier. That's where the doubled pawns come from. Bishop takes c3 earlier in the game. White definitely has a space advantage here. No question about that. 3 pawns right here compared to our 1 pawn. Usually a way you can tell where a space advantage, or who has a space advantage, is by simply looking at these 2 lines on the board. Whoever has more pawns is a bit better at that point. At this moment, it's 3 versus 1, and White's got the space advantage for sure. Let me go ahead. So the space advantage is here for White, and we have to figure out how to exchange, how to kind of get the position we need to get it into black's favor somehow. Or we need to at least like look for some way of trading to equalize a bit in the center of the board here. Because at the moment, we're definitely behind in space. Our bishop's blocked. White is threatening things like e5, which has been mentioned in the chat box, which is very true. If he gets to play e5, we're going to end up losing the h7 pawn because the knight's going to have to move, and we're going to run into some problems there. So we have to figure out what to do here. Play c5. C5, unfortunately, runs into... He's still going to play e5. The knight has to move, and we lose the h7 pawn. So that's kind of the main threat we need to... We need to somehow, you know, not let white just push his pawn to e5 right away. h6 so we don't lose it. Oh, h6 is a little passive, though technically that does avoid losing the pawn, I suppose. D takes c4 and then e5. Okay, could be an idea as well. Maybe playing the move e5 ourselves at some point. Now, we can't play e5 immediately because of, you know, I think white just takes the d5 pawn and we just lose material. We probably do want to play e5, but if we go there immediately, we just lose the d-pawn. If we take on c4, I think part of the problem here, white no longer has doubled pawns, and he still controls the e5 square. So he's still going to play e5, and we haven't really helped our position too much yet. So this is a bit of a calculation, you know, example here. We have to calculate how to solve our problems while also still giving black some problems as well. Oh, I'm sorry, giving white some problems as well. So what we can do in this position here, we can trade on e4 first. This immediately, you know, he can't play e5 because there's no e4 pawn there. Hey, Zuperino, thanks for the follow. Take on e4, pawn takes back, and now play the move e5. What's the difference here? Why can we get away with e5 now at this point? And I am seeing some of this in the chess.com TV chat as well. Take e4 and then e5. Yep, I'm seeing the same thing. Yeah, some other people mentioned it here in the Twitch chat as well. You know, I don't want to say the right move immediately and then, you know, not look at the other possibilities. We want to look at all of the options for sure. So the thing is here, there's no d5 pawn, right? There's no d5 pawn for white to capture. First of all, we are threatening also to take d4. We have two attackers on it. E takes d5 doesn't exist, very true. So, and also here, if white decides to take the pawn, we have to be a little careful here, though. If white takes the pawn, how should we react? Hey, Tazjack, thanks for the follow as well. Do we take with the rook? Do we do something different? This guy, Broba, Brobra, thanks for the follow as well. Do we take with the rook? Do we do anything different here? Hey, Emergency, nice to see you in the chat box there. This is a situation where we would not want to take with the rook. If we take with the rook, we are blockading the e-pawn, but this is not a very good blockade. It's easy for white to play knight f3, kick the rook out. You know, especially if we retreat, we're back to the exact same problems we had earlier here. Not a good situation for us. Knight has to move. We lose the h7 pawn. It's very, very bad for us. The best response here is going to be knight to g4. Or knight d7 or g4. Actually, both of them work out reasonably about the same. Knight to g4. We want to take back on the e5 pawn. We want to take with the knight. Why is a knight good for blockading this isolated pawn? Let's imagine, I don't know, some random move. Why is this knight much better than the rook? Well, 93 is actually a threat, so maybe white should play... Let's just imagine he plays rook e1. It's not the best move, but let's just say for the moment, you know, let's say rook e1. Why is a knight better than the rook for blockading? Yeah, 93 was a threat, so knight g4 did have some benefits to it for sure. Okay, Making says it blocks and attacks at the same time. Very true. The knight can be taken with a minor piece while the rook cannot. That is true. We don't mind trading off a pair of knights on e5, but we don't want to lose the rook on e5. So this would be a great position for black, actually. We've got the knight blockading an isolated pawn, doubled isolated c pawns for white, isolated a pawn for white. This is great. This is a terrific position for black. Bishop retreats, you know, develop the other knight, go to c5, go to d3. I mean, this is great. And Corrigan, thanks for the follow as well. So now let's see here, and Aduba Dumiati, thanks for the follow. Now let's see here, what if white makes a little bit of a different move? What if he plays knight f3? Knight f3 to protect the pawn here. How do we react to this? If we take the pawn immediately, there might be some problems, as we'll see. Knight to d7, knight to c6. Can't do knight e3. Now the bishop does cover e3. We can do knight to d7 or c6. Actually, either one works out. Knight to d7. The problem with taking on e5 here... Hey, Aimfeld, thanks for the follow. The problem with taking on e5 right here is that white can trade, and again, he can play bishop f4. Tyleron, thanks for the follow as well. And again, we lose our blockade here. We got to move our rook away somewhere. White gets to play the move e5, and all of a sudden, he just frees up his position. Technically, black is still better, probably due to the pawn structure problems. I'm seeing all the follows in here. Thanks for the follows, everybody. Sorry if I'm not catching all the names here. But the problem is the bishop is activated once again. So we don't want to let that happen. So instead, we can make the move knight to d7 or c6. Bishop f4. Take, take, take. If he decides to keep capturing the differences, now he can't kick the rook off. This is terrific for us. You know, very good position. Blockading everything. Terrible bishop on d3. You know, this is very good for black at this point. So this position was a little more focused on the... Whoops. Let me click back here. This position was a little more focused on some of the calculation involving the pawn trades right in the center of the board, but definitely still an interesting example, because this is a position you know, maybe not this exact position, but ideas like this, especially as you continue improving at chess, these are where some of the big decisions come in games. If black makes the wrong move here, if he takes on c4, or if he, you know, allows the move e5, or if he does something wrong here, he could end up just losing material, losing the game pretty quickly. However, if you play the correct moves, if you trade on e4, play e5, you know, you're going to be able to kind of fight back, and I think black is actually doing perfectly fine here. What if he keeps defending the pawn with bishop f4 and queen e2? I think you're referring to... hold on, let's go here. Well, if he keeps guarding the pawn, we can still just capture here. Take, take, take. We have enough firepower to keep that protected. Now, what if... Let's back up a little more. What if... Let's say white plays knight f3. Let's say he doesn't take the pawn. He plays knight f3 to pressure the pawn some more and protect his d4 pawn. We have like one or two final questions probably here. Chess can get deep. You don't always have to think of it, you know, that deep by any means, but some of the calculation can be a little tricky for sure. So let's say he plays knight f3. What do we do here? There are some little pitfalls for us to watch out for. Hey, the big boss. Nice to see you on the Chess TV chat. I think white playing d5 is a mistake because it goes up the c5 square. That is true. We'll look at that in a moment. If he ever does play d5, we can easily plop a knight onto c5 or, you know, maybe get the knight over to a5 somehow and target c4. His threat right now is simply to take the pawn, so we need to do something about that. C. Pearson says, is there some way I could email my game in to analyze my game? We might do, you know, game analysis from those in the chat box or those in the audience in a future stream. I'm kind of looking at some games that have already been sent in previous weeks and stuff like that. But, you know, tune in next time. Make sure you follow the stream here. Tune in next time, and, you know, we'll try to get your game analyzed at some point in the future. Developing the knight to d7 seems natural. Yeah, we can't take d4 still because of this e5 problem. That's still the problem with taking on d4. We could do knight c6 though. Knight c6 or d7 or oops, get rid of that. Knight c6 and d7 both protect the pawn and attack. I like knight c6 a bit more because it puts more pressure on the center, I'd say. If white plays the move d5, now we're ready to play knight a5, and we can go after the doubled c-pawns. Bishop a6, move the rook and put the knight on d6, and we can kind of try to pile up everything on the... I know that's a lot of arrows. Try to pile up everything on the c4 pawn. You know, reroute our pieces a bit and try to take advantage of the doubled pawns here. So this is, you know, a lot of calculation in regards to the pawn trades in the center. Yeah, knight fd7 is also available as well if you want to. This is from Ruben in the chess.com TV chat. If you want to avoid any bishop g5 pins, that is true. The main thing is, though, this idea of calculation involving these pawn trades in the center, watching out for your opponent's threats, and really just trying to figure out the best way to exchange and trade off that's going to help out black the best. You don't want to let your opponent do what they want to do, you know, stuff like that. Let's see here. Let me back up a little bit. I'm going to take one final question here from ZFox, I think, and then we're going to do a little bit of a wrap-up here at the end. ZFox is asking the question, what if... Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Knight c6, d5, knight a5. He's saying the move c5 here. What if he goes c5, sacrificing a pawn to double R's, a dynamic response? That is a dynamic response. It is probably the best response from white here, to be completely honest, because he wants to... hey, 1989 Dan, thanks for the follow. He doesn't want to be stuck with his own doubled pawn. He'd rather give us one. Maybe we have our own dynamic response. Is bishop takes d5 and e4 an idea? It's interesting. I don't know. There's some crazy stuff that might be available here, but you know, this would be probably the best, you know, the most even response at this point. But it could still get kind of messy here, depending on each side's response and stuff like that. Definitely an interesting game example here, though, and combined with our previous example we looked at as well. These two examples here have focused the most on, well, the first example we talked about how to use a long-term advantage versus our opponent's short-term advantage, how to untangle our pieces, how to focus on, Nadiash, thanks for the cheer, thanks for the bits, how to focus on getting our pieces developed, untangled, how to equalize the position, and also how certain decisions we make earlier in a game can affect the, you know, the later parts of the game. The end game, the king and pawn game, for example, was affected by that one e5 move. This example focuses a bit more on calculation, trying to make sure we capture and trade and push pawns at the right times, but definitely some interesting positions we looked at here during the show, focusing again on just helping us to improve at all of these different facets of chess. Now, one thing I do want to point out, because this is, you know, we are getting the host here from chess.com, and we do very much appreciate that. I do just want to say before wrapping up the show here, I want to thank you guys for joining the show today. I want to give you all a little reward for those of you wanting to improve at chess. If you sign up at chessuniversity.com, which is, you know, the little logo right above the chat box here on the stream, If you sign up at chessuniversity.com and enroll in any course, you can use the promo code SUNDAYSHOW to get a $5 discount off any course today. I'm just going to type that in the chat box, and you know, a little bit of a you know, gift for you guys for showing up today. So really appreciate that. Let me put it here. Yeah, okay. All right, there it is. Promo code SUNDAYSHOW as a reward for all viewers, and that's at chessuniversity.com. So once again, really appreciate everybody showing up. I'm also going to stay here for a couple questions if anybody has any, you know, any questions they want answered. And you know, probably wrap up in about another, you know, couple minutes or so here. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any anything that you guys want to wonder. Oh, can I set the board view? That would be an issue, wouldn't it? Sorry about that. I don't know how that got changed. Here, let's fix that board. Sorry about that. I didn't even realize that was affecting things. Fix that up for you guys. Okay, thanks a lot for the update. Mind if you friend me on chess.com? Yeah, for sure. My username, well, it shows here it's chess.com university. My username on, you know, on chess.com is Matty D. Oh, it's not gonna let me do that, is it? All right. Well, okay, let's just turn this off for a second. I'm not going to show the password. Try that back on. Okay, I'll type that out again. Username on chess.com is There we go. Oh, and now we got the big font back, so that's nice. Okay, Manukini says in the middle game when it's kind of a stuck position, how do you decide what to move? If it's a closed position, generally it's all about maneuvering and slowly improving. Look for pawn breaks. Look for which of your pieces are not placed well. Can you improve them? Can you trade off your badly placed pieces? Different things like that. It's a little hard to answer that generically, but definitely, you know, slowly improving in those closed positions if you can. Is the Rogozin an important line to study if you're a d4 player? Oh, here's a friend request. Hit the accept button. I'm a d4 player, and you know, I don't think it's as important as people might make it out to be. I'm not sure what people have told you about it before, but I don't think it's necessary necessarily. Oh, no problem at all, Naughty. I accepted the friend request, so hopefully it shows up on your screen. You're welcome. No problem at all. Let me move this a little bit. This will fix the oops, that shot it up. There we go. Where can we find the stream schedule? We're going to be streaming on here every Sunday, I believe, at 2 p.m. Central Time. I'm sorry, not Central, 2 p.m. Pacific Time. Next weekend on Sunday is going to be a simul given by another one of the instructors from chessuniversity.com. Every Sunday, yeah, there it is. So every Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific Time, not Central Time. That'll be our next stream here on this channel. And it'll get, you know, ideally hosted on chess.com TV. Can we make a schedule on Twitch? Yeah, we'll probably work on doing that in the below the video, I think is what you're referring to. We can probably set something like that up. Let's see. Can I play you in a quick blitz or bullet match? Try challenging me off of, once I finish the stream. I'll do it off stream. But I'm going to probably not stream once we wrap up in a couple minutes. Can somebody become a good chess player when you have bad memory? Yeah, for sure. You don't need to have, terrific memory to figure out what's going on the board. It just takes hard work. I would say that's definitely a big thing. Hard work, stick-to-itiveness, not just giving up when things seem a little rough. Stuff like that. Memory is important, I will say that, but you can still become a good chess player and not have the best memory in the world. Yeah, that's what it is, Naughty. I don't want to lose on stream. You got me. Let's see here. Okay, I think that's it, though. I think we're going to wrap up unless I see any other questions. Let's see. Can we request content of the classes? I would like to see Advanced Caro-Kann. Yeah, let's see. Who will you contact? Well, you can just go on the Chess University website, chessuniversity.com, and it'll show the content of the classes that are on there. So check that website out, and that's where we, post the content generally. What's Karpov's Ruy Lopez? I'm not sure if you're referring to maybe a specific line he plays. If you are referring to that, I'm not actually 100% sure. That would be... You'd have to probably Google that. Google would help me out a bit more. Would help you out a bit more than me at that point. What's my #1 tip to help players improve? It depends on the player's level. If you're asking like maybe a 900 rated player asking, my answer would be different than a 1500 rated player. That's why that question's a little tricky. I would probably say just, I don't know. It's a little hard without knowing your level. Playing a lot, pretty much just trying to absorb as much information as you can, I would say. Watch as many videos as you can, watch as many streams like this one and other ones on, on Twitch that are chess streams. Review your games. I would say that's big. Review every game that you played as best as you can. And if you're able to figure out what you did wrong in your games, try to fix that. Work on what you did wrong in your games, and that'll help you to improve. If you can't figure out what you did wrong, then maybe ask a stronger player. Maybe if you have a friend or, if you have a coach or something like that. Oh, you're very welcome, Chess Zebra. I enjoyed it. I really did. All right, guys. I think that's it for me, though. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here at this point. Once again, like has been typed out, make sure you check out chessuniversity.com, and we have a wide variety of resources, great classes, video recordings on a variety of topics. You can use the code, like we mentioned earlier, Sunday Show, to get $5 off. There's the link in the chat box. There you go, chessuniversity.com. Thanks for the follow, Mathisoni. I think I pronounced that wrong. Mathonsai? Sorry about pronouncing it wrong. Yeah, we've also had Grandmaster Viswanathan Anand teach in Chess University before. We've had Jacob Agard. We've had Alexei Shurov. We've had Anatoly Karpov. We had Dvoretsky before he passed away, unfortunately. We've had a variety of, great instructors in the program and stuff like that. So really hope you guys have enjoyed the show here today. We'll be back with another show next Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. That'll be a simul with another one of our instructors, FIDE Master Arnie Jokins, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy that show next weekend. Thanks for the 15 bits, Naughty Ash. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'll talk with you guys again in the future. Hopefully I will see you guys around in another stream one day, and I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, everybody. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.